From toxic dumps to climate change champions, how do we reshape the industry narrative? When I first started the DDI podcast, my journey into data centers and digital infrastructure was something of a new path and a new journey for me, and offered me the chance to step outside of my professional comfort zone into another new and cutting-edge area of the technology spectrum. Following a long-standing career in robotics, software, advanced manufacturing, and industrial automation, I was given the opportunity to pivot. And where many of the challenges I'd experienced in my previous roles around talent, energy, and sustainability were synonymous, so were some of the key learnings we could take forward into my new role. A year later, and we are seeing the change on multiple fronts, not only in the industry, acknowledging that it has a unique opportunity to collaborate and empower a new generation of energy, sustainability, and digital infrastructure professionals to join it, but what we are all facing are the same challenges, and we must work together as part of an ecosystem to inform, educate, and reposition the industry narrative. In this week's edition, I'm stepping away from our traditional podcast format and sharing with you a recent panel discussion I had the pleasure of taking part in at Data Center World in London recently, where we took a truly in-depth look at some of the industry's ESG commitments, the power of our ecosystem and the impact that it can have in positive PR, and how really collectively we can spearhead sustainable change in our sector. The panel was chaired by my colleague Kelly Becker, the president for Schneider Electric here in the UK and Ireland, and the panel featured key industry figureheads, including Lauren Ryder, CXO of Leading Edge, Worldwide Technologies Chief Technology Advisor David Locke, Dame Dawn Childs, CEO of Pure Data Centers, and Middlesex University student Madison Clements, who you will hear share some truly thought-provoking insights into her research and journey so far, and some of the key things that we as senior leaders need to do differently and collectively to help engage the next generation of professionals into our sector. This panel for me was a real highlight, and I really hope that you find it as insightful and informative as I did. Stay tuned and enjoy.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to our panel. We're going to have a conversation today about the key issues facing the data centers, some of the key challenges. How do we actually take everything that's exciting about this industry and talk to it as well with young people? How do we recruit more people, and how are we solving the challenges that are there? So, Mark, I'm going to start with you. So, if you're like me and you open the news every weekend and you look at BBC or the Irish Times or the Business Post or the FT, you see lots and lots of articles about the toxic dumps that are data centers and the bad things this is doing to our environment. How do we actually really start to have a different conversation about both the positives, what it's doing to drive our society, and what we as an industry need to do to communicate better along those lines?
Well, thanks for coming to me first of all. So, good morning, everybody. So I'm Mark Yeeles, the Vice President of our Secure Power business for Schneider Electric here in the UK and Ireland. It's a great question, right? So I think this is all about the narrative and the ecosystem and a little bit of understanding as well. So I think when I met with a few of the press last year, we started to talk about how do we make this industry not just more widely and broadly known, but how do we ensure that people truly understand what this industry stands for? And I think we probably just need to think about how do we reflect and think about this as the fourth utility. And I think there's lots of different areas we can focus on. We probably just need to make it real for people as well in different areas of the whole ecosystem. So we probably need to start talking about the way a data center would operate and form part of our everyday life and how it helps us operate on a daily basis. Also we need to think about the narrative around how data and data centers help us become more efficient more broadly across industries outside of data centers as well. So there's a big piece of work to be done. But I think my main takeaway from the last year in this industry is that the ecosystem is there and we can solve and achieve this together.
Lauren, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I work with businesses to transform them, and most of my clients come to me looking to grow. So I work with leading edge data centers as their CXO, designing employee experiences and customer experiences. But some of my clients come to me with issues, and the data center industry is facing a massive issue. And it's not just around this PR around the environment. And if we look at where it stems from, and I really do believe it is a lack of diversity in the industry. I mean, if we just look around, there's probably in the whole thing about 10% women, which is reflective of the industry as a whole. And we really need to do something. And it's not just gender diversity we're talking about, but me being a woman, it's something that I do reflect on. So, we have to look at what the challenges are. So why does it even matter? And we know that businesses and industries that look at diversity are actually make more revenue. They're more innovative. They have 36% more profit. So it's not only good for the industry as a whole, but also for the businesses. But, the challenge is it can't just be a box ticking exercise. I worked with a CEO for the data center. They had a whole team of middle-aged white men. And I said, you need to hire. And they said, okay. They came to me a few months later. We did it. They said, not only is she a woman, she's a lesbian. We tick 2 boxes. And I'm going, you can't write this. So what really needs to change is that we actually need to get deep down and change behaviors, change mindsets, do some education, actually invest in programs. You look at the industry body, iMasons, they actually have programs around DEI. We need to get behind them, but also the businesses, the data center businesses, from the C-suite to the board, all the way down, need to understand the impacts of diversity and then how they can roll these programs out so we can actually make real change across the industry.
So it sounds like if we appeal to more people and more people, that communities will actually begin to understand what's the value of data centers. Why would we want them in our community, our country? So Madison, I think it's pretty clear you're of a different generation than the rest of us. Why do you care about this topic? And what do you think the impact is as a lot of business leaders here that are working in this industry, but also needing to appeal to a generation that's very concerned about the planet, climate change, but also really loves the technology and the power that comes out of a data center? Where's your thinking on this?
Yeah, so I'm a business management student, second year, specializing in sustainability. I think in regards to the negatives around the data center industry, it's less about that and more about demystifying the industry to the young professionals as a whole. It's really hard to understand and know the negatives if the industry itself doesn't, appeal to young professionals and they don't have an idea of what actually goes on in the industry. And a good example of this is when I was in my information systems class last semester, I walked up to the professor and I said, are we going to touch on data centers at any point? And his simple response was, it's not important to the coursework. And I think that's really telling about how young professionals really don't know what goes on in the data center industry. And it's hard to say that the negatives are what's keeping them away when they don't actually have an idea of what's happening. And I just think that with the technology and with my generation's love and belief in sustainability and ESG, there's a lot of changes and good things that can come from recruiting young professionals.
So Dawn, you're the CEO of a company building and running and operating data centers. You hear Lauren and Madison talk a little bit about diversity, young people, gender, all of these sorts of things. How are you guys considering this and looking at this from a corporate citizenship standpoint? How do you look at a data center and in your own mind say, we're not dirty, toxic dump people. We're doing something great for the environment and we're doing something great for society. What are those kind of conversations like within your business?
So I think it's really important to change the narrative around data centers. So Madison is absolutely right. Getting the information out there so that people can make informed decisions about joining us for a career is really important because even when I joined data centers a couple of years ago, I didn't know what they were. And as you say, Pure builds and operates data centers globally for hyperscale customers. So big tech customers, which again, most people outside the industry wouldn't even understand who they were and what they did. So I think translating it is really important. From a Pure perspective, the way we look at it is to try and work with the communities where we're building data centers. So for example, in London, as we expand our site there, we're building one of the largest green walls in Europe on the side of it, which will effectively become the lungs of that region, because where we're building it in London is the only place in the UK where somebody has died and had cause of death is pollution on their death certificate. Wow. So we felt it was really important to connect with that community and figure out the problems they were trying to solve and what a data center could do beyond being the critical national infrastructure that it really is, because we all need data centers, right? even if you don't know it. So what was the community needing? How could we appeal to the local planning authorities, and also the people who are going to see this big data center in their back garden? We're also right on the edge of a triple SI site, so a site of special scientific interest, as it's labelled in the UK. So making sure that we have the right biodiversity in that green wall to really help to nurture that triple SI site that we're next door to. So it's really unlocking the things that are a challenge for the local community. I also think the inclusion point is really important. I chair the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for Infrastructure Masons, and getting the diversity tick. Yes, of course, we all need to drive diversity, but inclusion is really the key. If we don't open up our arms to people outside of the data center industry, we will not have enough people to be able to build the data center infrastructure that is needed over the next coming years. So we have to learn how to be more inclusive. We have to open our arms. We have to translate the data center industry for young people coming through. And the good news is that young people, and particularly women, are really, really enthused by a career that really links into the sustainability agenda. So if we solve the sustainability challenge in data centers, we will also appeal to a more diverse workforce as well.
Yeah, I've worked in the data center industry in my multiple capacities within Schneider in the last 10 years. And I can say that the industry is innovating as well, as you say, right? Talking to local communities, trying to figure out the grid issues and becoming sort of this fourth utility. Dave, when you are looking at this and working alongside your customers, how do you guys think about that impact around wider society and the role you play? Both positive and negative, because I think we have to talk a little bit about the perceptions versus realities.
I was going to say the exact same thing. So at Worldwide, we supply a lot of the technology and infrastructure that goes into data centers. There's always a reason that's going in there. There's always a purpose. It's an application. It's some kind of capacity for content. And I think, as you said, the perception starts actually with better transparency in the whole industry. I mean, I think one of the problems that equally has been done so well is that we all walk around with these all day long, and we talk about cloud, and you have all your content, your photos, your videos, just on demand. But no one really knows where it is coming from. You said it yourself, even what is a data center coming into it. And so I think there's a transparency of just understanding the impact as a user and a consumer of content and what that means to the back end. And by sort of opening that up, I think that would open people's eyes to actually wanting to be a part of that industry because they like being the consumer of what they see, but also they may have a better understanding of then the impact of every stream has or every video has on the planet, and in terms of what it takes to actually keep that alive and available at the touch of a button.
I think it's a really critical point, because if you're like me, you carry around pretty much 4 devices at all times, 1 or 2 phones, an iPad, a Kindle, a computer. And the European Commission has said that about 2.5% of energy consumed in the EU right now is data centers, expected to get up to 3.2. I think we have to talk about innovation and what people are doing. So Dawn, when we talk about renewables and the conversation about renewables, how deep is that going for you guys right now as you look at your future build plans and how to make things more sustainable ultimately from the beginning of your designs?
And so it is very important, but let's be clear, renewable energy on its own will not solve the sustainability challenges of a data center, particularly when you're having to build in sort of metros, capital cities, where, yes, you might connect into the grid and there might be renewables supposedly on the grid, but you definitely can't build a solar farm or a wind farm next to your data center in the middle of London. So that is not a panacea. So we have to look at different types of materials to use within the data center, but also how to work within the broader ecosystem to help to innovate and to bring other forms of energy onto the grid. So one of the constraints in the UK, for example, is that there are only so many renewables on the grid. And the way that the regulatory authority, so Ofgem, were looking at it previously, they had a first come, first serve sort of queuing system to get generation connections onto the grid. And there was a queue of 400 gigawatts of renewables to come onto the grid, and the peak demand for all of the power was only 65 gigawatts. They had a whole bunch of zombie projects in this queue because they were not able, because it was first come, first serve within the regulation, they weren't able to get rid of people who had just put prospective projects in the queue because everybody wanted to get their name on the queue. So they put in these projects before they were even designed. So working with the whole ecosystem, so I went and spoke to the regulator and said, look, we can't get our demand connection to get onto the grid. We want to have it, backed up to a renewable power purchase agreement. How do I navigate this? So we were able to link in the demand side profile with the generation side profile and go, okay, let's speak to the regulator. Let's try and change that, get rid of some of the zombie projects. Let's also try and do the same on the demand side. So it's thinking outside of the current systems that you're operating and working across the entire ecosystem, because we can't solve it individually. We have to understand where the blockers and the barriers are to get to the outcome that we want.
Absolutely. I think there's such an incredible piece of this, which is simply about education as well, backed from the highest levels of governments across the world to the regulators and certainly down into other populations. People, I think, don't even know sometimes what we're talking about. We could run a whole panel on UK and Ireland planning issues, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we'll hold that one for the next DCW. Mark, you work in both the UK and Ireland. I think there's been lots of press, even up to this weekend in Ireland, about some of the grid challenges, what's really needed to move forward. What are you seeing as a company that Schneider is having to do to adapt to that? What do you see as happening in the local communities and the local companies we work alongside to adapt to all of this information? I think it's confusing at times to what really is even the solution.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the recent narrative, certainly from Ireland, has been, forefront of my mind on how we better have an impact in Ireland. I think there's also a discussion that needs to happen around how do we solve some of this. And I think, I completely agree with you. There's an ecosystem play here, but actually, I think that ecosystem, in terms of how do we solve on some of this, can actually even sit outside the data center sector itself. So I think there's learnings to be had from multiple sectors. I mean, my past is in manufacturing as an example, where often there's challenges on power quality, for example, but those guys probably have spent quite a bit of time trying to understand how they better get efficient in this space. So I think there's some learning more broadly across the ecosystem, for sure. There's an opportunity, I think, for the ecosystem to better collaborate with government and more broadly across both governments, actually, in Ireland and the UK, to help us better understand how we can have a much better impact locally. And then I think coming back to the renewables piece, perhaps this is the time to think, well, how do we expand the scope and the reach of data centers across the UK? I'm very fortunate. I speak to a number of decision makers in data center companies who are now thinking, well, how can I broaden my reach up into the Northwest? Certainly in Birmingham, and then now with British Volt not performing so well in the Northeast, there's a whole renewables topic there that we can tap into. So I think there's a number of different aspects in the ecosystem that can help solve this challenge.
Well, so let's bring up this topic of AI. Artificial intelligence, which is going to, I think, rock the industry to the next level as we move forward. The need for greater power and the ability, and as you said, everybody wanting to do more and more. Lauren, where is your mind around both the opportunity, I think, for the industry around AI, back to some of the original conversations around how do we adapt to actually meet the needs of society, which is really what we're doing, and meet the needs of so many different people who could have opportunities in our industry?
Yeah, AI is a really interesting topic. I actually went to a presentation just a few months ago with a gentleman from AECOM who designs data centers, and he took us through a presentation of how we could repurpose existing data centers to make them viable for AI. And he took us through this whole stage, and basically where he ended was an entire huge data center with one rack with high power density and a bunch of wasted space. And I thought it was an interesting presentation, but what he didn't cover was the sustainability aspect. And what he said was, we have to build new data center farms that are specifically for AI, which is exactly what would need to happen. But when he doesn't touch the sustainability aspect, we've actually lost, an entire piece of the puzzle. And what I think really where we need to go from here to be able to enable this is actually industry needs to work together to have this diversity of thought. We need to bring different industries, different businesses, everyone together to understand and to solve these problems collectively so that we can meet all the needs of our community while building for a sustainable future.
So we're in a global election cycle this year. It will be very exciting, no doubt. Madison, when you think about jobs at the core of what every government is talking about, they're trying to create jobs, higher paying jobs, certainly if you're in the UK, and you look at you in the next 18 months graduating from university, what are the kinds of things you would recommend to us to work alongside educational institutions, get closer to students earlier on? Give us some idea of tangible things we should be doing.
So as a second year student, I can say that the one thing they tell you from the minute you enter second year is internships. It matters. You need one. If you don't have one, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And I actually conducted my own survey and I looked at 105 or 165 data center internships that are on the market for this summer. Out of 165, 4 of them were non-engineering, non-IT, and non-computer science. And that covered sales, HR, supply chain, and marketing. And don't get me wrong, engineering, computer science, incredibly vital, but so is your sales team, so is your supply chain team, so is your marketing team, so is your HR team. And you have thousands of students like myself who are studying business management, business administration, sales, and whatnot, who are primed and ready for an opportunity to enter the industry. And all it really comes down to is just opening up those opportunities and allowing us to come in and learn from you.
I'm not an engineer. I started my career in sales, and I tell a lot of engineers what to do every day. And so I think you're so right. We need to be more open about the kinds of roles and the things. So you've talked a little bit about apprentices.
Yep.
When we were prepping for this. Can you talk to us about how you're appealing to Madison's generation through apprenticeships in a different way?
Yeah, so we've, over the last couple of years, really enhanced our approach to the apprentice schemes and diversifying how we appeal to a broader set of candidates. But to your point, we actually have gone to a diverse set of roles as well. So it's marketing, it's sales, it's engineering, it's cross-section. But we still keep a rotation in place so that everyone gets to see each part of that in the business and sort of get to learn and find out where they're going to end up. Yeah.
Well, I think I'll always take really smart, motivated people, and you can teach a lot on the job, can't you? So
can I just add something to that? There's definitely one thing about having, people, interns to come in, but I think within an organization, you can't be what you can't see. So in addition to getting interns, when you're bringing people into your organization, make sure that it's the type of people that you do want to bring for interns as well, so they can reflect off the people who are in the organization.
So before I get to Q&A, Mark, talk a little bit about this ESG cohort and what is a groundswell that we're trying to think through.
So as I mentioned earlier, I've been in this industry. This is my birthday today, actually. So I was here last year. So one of the things that we've been trying to think about really more broadly across the industry is we've talked about ecosystems. We've talked about talent, early talent. We're now starting to build, I can't go into too much detail today, but we're starting to build a cohort and a collective together to help try and solve some of the biggest challenges we see around the ESG topic. And we're meeting today actually as a collective. And one of the things that we think is really important is that not only do we get senior leaders being part of that panel, but we also get, people of Madison's age and those who are on grad programs, apprentice programs today to be a fully fledged member of that cohort too. So we're looking forward to seeing what we can do. Watch this space. We'll be out to market with some of the outputs from today, I'm sure very shortly, but we're proud as Schneider Electric to kind of stand behind the program and really bring attention to what we're trying to do to help bring this wonderful industry together.
All right, so we're going to open up for a few questions. Anybody have something they want to ask the panel?
In terms of AI, do you think that will make the design of data centers more efficient, less power hungry, so to speak?
So no is a very short answer because there's going to be far greater power density needed. However, the cooling should be more efficient. That the slight challenge that we're going to have over the next few years is where we have to build hybrid data centers, where particularly the hyperscale customers aren't yet clear whether it's a normal cloud data center or whether it's an AI data center or even a cloud data center with an AI overlay. And so you're having to build for both or design for both challenges. So it will become more inefficient, I believe, and then we might be able to get more efficiencies out of the other end. But the good thing with AI is actually if you apply the application of AI to the data center, then you can get more efficient cooling and you can start to get some great data points and you can drive the pathway to better efficiency. But I think in this current moment, in the near future, it becomes more inefficient, but before it gets more efficient, because we have to design for both.
And using after point is security on these data centers. One of the data centers I used had armed security guards outside. Do you think they could be replaced by AI?
You know that they do have those. They've got the robot dogs that sit outside of data. We actually, so leading edge data centers is where, if I'm in Australia, we have data centers about regionally, and our data centers are all dark data centers, meaning we don't have any people. And we've got a sea of cameras and we've got big tri-spike fences. And we actually did consider having remote robot AI dogs outside for a little bit. But our investors didn't like that, though. So we backed out of that pretty quickly.
Right. Any other questions?
Yeah, hi, my name is Inge Woudstra and I work in iMasons as the Diversity and Inclusion Program Manager. Now, recently, we're doing a survey and it hasn't quite been published, but I can give you a little peek into it. We interviewed CEOs and very senior people in the industry and asked them what their top 10 issues were for the industry. And not a single one mentioned diversity and inclusion. They mentioned people, they said lack of talent, but no one said, and therefore we need to be more diverse and inclusive. So I've heard it all over the panel here. What is happening? How come you know this? And other CEOs don't seem to know this. What is going on?
Well, it's because they're men and they don't see it. And that's not really actually a joke, because it's really difficult to stand in somebody else's shoes and really understand someone's lived experience. So if you have a C-suite of middle-aged white men, as many data center businesses do, they won't understand that and it won't be an issue for them. And this is about the education. So we educate our C-suite and we educate our boards on, the value of diversity and how much money they're going to be making because they do have diversity. But I think it really starts with that education and awareness.
And I think there's a risk perception piece as well, because oftentimes when you put adverts out for whatever the new hire is you want in your particular company, you think, oh, they need to have had data center experience because I want them to hit the ground running. I need to be impactful. They need to be credible. So I'm going to put 5 years data center experience, and so you're never ever going to get beyond the pool that you're currently fishing in. And so I think there's this sort of perceived risk of getting talent in from outside. Whether it's just a different industry and, whether it's male, female, indifferent, I don't care. But if it's outside the industry, if you're only fishing in the industry, you're never, ever going to get anything more diverse than you currently have. So I think it's that risk perception that stops people.
Can I add
go
something?
ahead.
So I think I completely agree for the start point, but I think it does come down to the leadership and then the culture that drives through an organization. We're very blessed that our leadership at Worldwide, it's a private-owned company. They've been there since its inception in 1990, and it's actually the largest minority-owned business in America. And so it's been sort of systemic since its creation, and we have huge amounts of D&I type forums and groups, from Latinos to gay, lesbian, female, etc. And that has created sort of these channels for acceptance and groups within the organization. And I think by blending them together, it creates a very positive, environment to be working in. But it is unique to some degree, and that's what we need to be able to share elsewhere.
Well, want to thank everybody for joining our panel today. I think a few of the panelists will be around afterwards if there's questions to be asked, or you were shy to take the mic. Look, we all have a role to play in evolving our industry, changing it. It's a critical piece of society, and so we need to do a lot of work around educating and helping people actually understand the good that's coming out of this and the opportunities that are aligned to that. So thank you guys very much.